The Royals got it done again tonight, and at this point in the season, it doesn't matter how they get them, just as long as they can get them. We'll dive into it all next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Well, the Royals made things a little bit easier after a 3-0 win tonight in Washington. Once again, it was the pitching staff doing most of the heavy lifting. The offense didn't necessarily break through, but 3 runs feels like a lot when the Royals hadn't scored for 27 innings going into the 10th inning in Tuesday night's game. But a win is a win. At this point in the season, it doesn't matter how you get them. It doesn't matter if it's 1-0. It doesn't matter if you had a 10-run lead and you blow that lead and you find a way to win an extra innings. It doesn't matter. As long as you keep winning, you are going to put yourself in a very good position. It wasn't as good as last night, as the Royals were able to get a win and Seattle and Minnesota lost, but you're not going to feel sorry about winning a baseball game, because as long as the Royals keep doing that, they're going to be just fine. And tomorrow they're going to have their shot in the afternoon with Michael Walk on the bump to sweep the Washington Nationals. But in tonight's game, I think you saw a group that was a little bit more loose. They looked a little bit more comfortable at the plate, and the defense and pitching continues to win them ball games. And even though this offense isn't doing what you need them to do, this pitching staff is really building up some confidence and building up some steam as we get closer and closer to playoff baseball. That is not saying it's a guarantee the Royals are in, because right now there's still a little bit of work to be done. And I would love to sit here and tell everybody that it's going to happen. I wouldn't worry, but I'm not going to do that, because my words are not going to give you any comfort. I feel like we talked about this last week. Me saying it's going to be all right and they're not going to collapse doesn't make you feel better. The only thing that makes you feel better is this team winning baseball games, which they've now done in back-to-back nights. You feel good now about tomorrow and trying to go for a sweep and really making things difficult on Minnesota, because if the Royals win tomorrow, they eliminate Seattle. So Seattle will need the Royals and the Twins to keep losing to have any sort of shot in that final weekend series against Oakland. But the Royals have a 2.5 game lead on Seattle. If they win tomorrow, there's a 3-game cushion. Seattle doesn't play tomorrow, so they can't make up that ground over the weekend, even if the Royals lost all 3 and Seattle won all 3, because the Royals have the tiebreaker. And if you're wondering, well, hold on, Seattle and the Royals tied this year in the season series, then I believe you go to divisional record, and the Royals have a better one at that point than Seattle. But I do know the Royals have the tiebreaker over Seattle. So they go and win tomorrow. Michael Walk against Patrick Corbin. The Mariners are out of the picture. You don't need to worry about them over the weekend if the Royals just win tomorrow. If Minnesota wins tomorrow, that would mean the Royals need to win at least one in Atlanta, and the Orioles would need to win the series against Minnesota. So that's what would need to happen, is the Royals need to win at least one, and the Orioles would need to just take 2 of 3 from Minnesota, because actually, yeah, I think that would be, not even in that. I think that would be bare minimum, wouldn't it be? Yeah, so that would be the bare minimum. I'm trying to go through that in my mind. A little bit hard to do when you've been doing this now for a week and all these numbers and standings and games back and tiebreakers get a little bit jumbled together in your brain. But tomorrow, that is what feels like is the likeliest thing, is that both the Royals and Twins are going to win. The Twins were down 3-0, 3 batters into the game tonight, and they found a way to get 8 unanswered runs, and they beat a bad Marlins team. I think the Royals are very fortunate. The Marlins even took 1 in that series, but nobody's going to feel completely safe until that final out is recorded on a game in which the Royals can clinch a playoff berth. Nobody's going to feel any better about that sort of outlook until the Royals actually do it. Now, things did change because of the hurricane that would be passing through Atlanta. The Mets and Braves series got washed out, and it's now getting pushed to Monday, the final 2 games for a doubleheader, which means the Braves are likely going to have Chris Sale and Max Fried go this weekend against Kansas City. It makes things a hell of a lot harder because those are 2 of the better arms in the National League. Chris Sale's going to win a Cy Young, and the Royals are going to have to find a way to win 1 game in Atlanta. Now, I know that winning is going to secure all those comfortable feelings, and winning is going to solve everything, and they still have to go out there and win tomorrow afternoon. The only reassuring thing I believe that can happen, where it's not just about going into a series and saying, well, you need 1 here and the Orioles to lose 2. This is really, to me, what would be almost the nail in the coffin. If the Royals win tomorrow and Miami finds a way to beat the Twins in the series finale and they play tomorrow at 6:40, I think at that point it would be a situation in which it's a dire spot. It's an absolute dire spot for Minnesota at that point because they would be 3 games back and they would need to sweep Baltimore and the Royals would need to get swept by Atlanta. So if the Royals lost all 3 games and Minnesota won 2 of 3, it doesn't matter. So the Twins, if they lose tomorrow, they can't lose again. And quite honestly, I think they're viewing it as that way anyway. They got to go undefeated the rest of the way. And they can't just count on the Royals to lose. It's going to be a very tough series in Atlanta. But first things first, it's just about, grabbing 1 tomorrow. I think if you grab 1 tomorrow, you can breathe a little bit easier going into the weekend series against Atlanta. You can see what happens tomorrow night between the Twins and the Marlins. But also, I said this to a buddy, is, it's uncomfortable to be this close in a wild card chase. Like Detroit, they're already preparing the champagne. They've taken the series 2 out of 3 against the Rays, and they could go for a sweep tomorrow. And they got the White Sox in town. So at this point, I'm not even viewing the Tigers games anymore because the Tigers are going to make it. The Tigers could win tomorrow, and then they're going to win likely all 3 against the White Sox at home. The Twins, on the other hand, they could get it done. They still have good and talented players on that team. And Baltimore might be going into that series over the weekend not having much to play for. If you're looking to root for something, root for Baltimore to sweep the Yankees tomorrow. And if they do that with Corbin Burns on the bump, that gives them something to play for on Friday, which is when Minnesota would be in town. So if they sweep the Yankees tomorrow, they, at bare minimum, will have 1 game that they are going to try to put everybody out there and continue to fight for the American League East title. It's a very low chance they get it at this point because I believe if the Yankees win 1 more game, it's not going to matter. Right? So if the Yankees win 1 more game, they have won the American League East and the Orioles will be locked in as that wild card spot. If the Orioles lose tomorrow, they will have nothing to play for in that final weekend. And that isn't to say, the Twins are going to come in and just mop the floor with them because the Marlins have nothing to play for and they found a way to win 1 game of that series. And maybe they could grab a second one tomorrow. But my point for this whole spiel is that the Royals can just, turn the pressure up a notch on Minnesota by winning. If they win tomorrow, all the pressure in the world is on Minnesota. And that becomes, in my opinion, and I hate the term must win, it becomes a must-win in Minnesota tomorrow night if the Royals find a way to win. What would be a very nerve-wracking thing is if the Royals lose tomorrow. If the Royals lose tomorrow and Minnesota wins in the evening, that puts the Royals with a one-game lead and having to go to Atlanta for the final three. And the Twins would take on Baltimore, and we'll see. We'll see. I feel like talking about these hypotheticals isn't the best thing to do because it may not happen in the end, right? But first things first, if you just win, it doesn't matter how they come at this point. Touched on that a little bit yesterday. It doesn't matter, right? As long as you keep winning, that is going to put you in the playoffs. And the Royals can focus on other teams. I get that, but leave that up to the fans, honestly. The Royals need to be focused on making sure they can pull off this sweep against Washington and then finding a way to win one in Atlanta. I know it's going to be a tough matchup in all three games there, and they might have to use Cole Reagans in game 162. You hope it doesn't get to that point, but if they keep winning, it's not going to matter. They won't get to that point. They could rest everybody in game 162 and gear up for the wild card game on Tuesday, but that might be putting the cart ahead of the horse. You've heard me say that before, and I'll probably say it many times in these last couple episodes to close out the week. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's talk about this pitching staff, but maybe more importantly, this bullpen. They are seeming to turn it on at the best possible point in the season. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to two sponsors, starting with Booking.com. Explore those U.S. cities that you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your rival city during the postseason. And the Royals go to the postseason, it's probably going to be on the road for that wild card series. In fact, I would put all my money on the fact that the Royals will probably be heading to either Baltimore or Houston if they do, in fact, make it into the postseason. But maybe it's time to taste test your baseball's competition stadium cuisine. Luckily, on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that's right just for you. With Booking.com's wide variety of choice across the U.S., you can go incognito to all of your rivals' cities. So with Booking.com, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, again, even your rivals. So book today at Booking.com, booking.yeah. We also want to give a shout out to FanDuel as our other sponsor today. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And if you're thinking about putting some money down on the game tomorrow, never a bad idea to go with Michael Wacha. Nobody's really dominating offensively for the Royals. Maybe you feel like somebody's due. They haven't homered since last Monday. And Patrick Corbin hasn't been that great this year for Washington and hasn't been that great for quite some time. So maybe you feel like Bobby Wood Jr. is due. Maybe you feel like Salvador Perez is due to go yard. Maybe Hunter Renfroe. Somebody in that lineup might be due to go yard because it has been a long time since the Royals have had somebody knock one out of the park. So maybe see if you can cash out big with a home run pick tomorrow for the Royals, but do so over at FanDuel. It was funny that tonight it reminded me that when things aren't going well with one part of your team, you tend to just ignore what else is going on with your pitching staff. If your pitching staff is dominating, you're not really focused on what they're doing in games that are lost, right? I feel like that with a bullpen, the Royals have had this a lot this year. The bullpen will have its best stretches when the team's losing games. And that sounds weird, but the bullpen will pitch well when the game's out of control. It's not a high leverage spot. It's 6-2 and you get good innings from guys that maybe you don't always get good innings from. But it was funny that the Royals went scoreless for 27 innings offensively. And we completely forgot the fact that the pitching staff had a scoreless inning streak of their own and now hold the franchise record for 26 consecutive scoreless innings. That began on Sunday with the Giants. The Giants scored in the second inning. Brett Wisely had a RBI single with 2 outs. And the Royals haven't allowed a run since. And I remember a lot of people saying, well, this offense is crumbling. They're falling under the pressure. They're not ready for a moment like this. And we just turned a blind eye to the fact that the pitching staff absolutely is ready for something like this. And the bullpen now is giving us a little bit more confidence that if they can get into the playoffs, this may be a rotation and a bullpen you don't really want to face. They're not as hot as Detroit right now. Nobody's as hot as Detroit. But we've known for so long the rotation is the strength. It's the backbone of the 2024 Royals. And when you get that combination of a good start and the bullpen can lock things down, that's the recipe for winning in the postseason. And you just hope that the offense can scratch across 3 or 4 runs. And a best of 3 series, you might just need 3 or 4 for Cole Reagans. You might just need a couple for Seth Lugo. Might just need a couple for Micah Waka. And to know that the bullpen might be hitting their stride because now they've got defined roles. I think everybody knows when they would be going in. And then you get these bursts from Daniel Lynch, who's been dynamite since coming back up from Omaha. He's had 16 2/3 scoreless innings since returning from Omaha. And he has just been stifling left-handed hitters. He's been doing that all season long, but now he's actually a weapon out of the bullpen. Sam Long's found some rhythm again. Chris Bubic is their setup guy. Lucas Ursig is their 9th inning guy. The guys that have been struggling for the majority of the year, Chris Stratton, he's not going to be there. Hunter Harvey and James MacArthur have been shut down. Carlos Hernandez isn't going to be pitching in high leverage spots in the bullpen. So the guys that you want to go out there, they're all going to be available almost every single night in the postseason. Barring some unique circumstances like Lucas Ursig throwing 40 pitches to get 9 outs in a postseason game, he probably wouldn't be available for the next game. But I don't envision something like that happening. John Schreiber tonight, walking the first 2 guys that he faces, then he gets 2 strikeouts and a loud out, but still a fly out to end the threat. These are things you are starting to see come together. I also want to factor in the Nationals offense has been worse than the Royals in the last, I think 8 or 9 games or so. They've only scored 14 runs in the last 8 or 9 games and have been shut out in back-to-back games. So I'm not going to act like this bullpen has just been cutting down the Yankees lineup and the Dodgers lineup. And it'll be impressive if they go into Atlanta and have the same success that they've had against the Nationals so far. But to me, the bullpen is starting to give you that confidence that if it came down to it and the Royals were clinging to a 1 or 2 run lead in the final 3 innings in Baltimore or in Houston, if they got to that point in the wild card series, you feel good about who they would turn to. I feel like the 8th and 9th inning is a pretty comfortable thing right now. Not that Chris Bubic and Lucas Ursig can't blow a game. They absolutely could, and they've done it so far this year. But it's that part where, for me, if you blow a game with the guy out there on the mound, I don't really get too caught up about it. I don't lose sleep over that because that was the best option, and he didn't do his job. Okay, I can feel gutted about the loss, but I don't feel gutted about the decision. For example, if Angel Serpa, who's looked better since coming back up from Omaha, and he's sitting 96 to 99 with the sinker, and he's locating it well and getting ground balls, now that's a great sign moments, days before the playoffs, if the Royals can get there. But if he went in there last night and got walked off, there would have been some gripe about the decision to go to Angel Serpa. If you blow the game in the 8th with Chris Bubic on the mound, I'm sorry. I'm fine with Chris Bubic on the mound. If he doesn't do his job, that's baseball. It's sports. It happens. If Lucas Ursig blows it in the 9th, okay, it's baseball. It happens. You can be mad at Lucas Ursig, but he's the guy you want out there in that spot. To me, it's going to come down to who is the 5th, 6th, and 7th inning guy. I think there is a strong case at this point to think that Daniel Lynch could be a 6th inning guy in the postseason. I think you can look to Alec Marsh being a 5th or 6th inning guy. Sam Long absolutely can. John Schreiber absolutely can. And when you kind of get those defined roles and set them for the postseason, you feel a lot better about your chances. In the same way back in 2014, and this bullpen, of course, is nowhere close to where HDH was. But it was easier for the Royals to manufacture their runs early on and then strategize for the late innings because have a lead by the 6th inning and you're good. You're going to win the game. It's not that simple for the Royals, but it sure is a hell of a lot harder when you do not have any defined roles. It's all right, let's see if this works. Let's try to play these matchups. And really, defined roles can only happen if those guys succeed in that role a lot of times in a row. And Chris Bubich has now done it in the 8th inning a pretty good amount. Lucas Erceg has done it in the 9th a pretty good amount. Sam Long here and there, John Schreiber here and there, Daniel Lynch, since coming back from Omaha, has been nails. Carlos Hernandez has had his moments. Angel Serpa has had his moments. This bullpen's starting to come into shape a little bit at the right time. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying I got 100% faith in them going into a postseason series, but at least this bullpen is showcasing that when they catch fire, when they do things well, when they can get quick outs, when they can get ahead in the count, they're a bullpen you can count on. And in these first 2 games against Washington, you have absolutely been able to count on them. They were phenomenal tonight, in which Lorenzen, who left with lower body fatigue, only was able to go 2 2/3. They picked up the slack. Daniel Lynch was great. They then turned to Serpa after that. He was great. They turned to Sam Long after that. He was great. And Lucas Erceg was great in the 9th inning as the Royals got it done. They're back to 10 games over 500, and they will carry their franchise record 26 consecutive scoreless innings into tomorrow afternoon. First pitch, 12:05, Michael Wacha on the bump against Patrick Corbin. We're going to take our final break. When we come back, I think this offense can breathe a little easier now. Now, it's easier said than done to just feel normal and comfortable and not too stressed out in a playoff chase. But I think right now, after a couple of wins, they can relax a little bit and play a little bit more loose. We'll dive into why next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor in Game Time. And I know that there are no more regular season games at Kauffman Stadium, and the next time they would likely be at Kauffman Stadium would be after a wild card series win. But first things first, they got to get into the playoffs, then win a wild card series to ensure they could get a home playoff game. But if you're thinking about buying tickets maybe to Atlanta this weekend to see them maybe clinch, or maybe you're trying to go to tomorrow's game if you're near the Washington, D.C. area, buy your tickets over at Game Time. It's where I go to buy all my tickets, whether it be baseball games, football, concert tickets, comedy show tickets. It's just the best app to use. You can have those notifications to tell you when the best deals are happening, when tickets are about to sell out, the cheapest tickets, most expensive tickets. They got it all covered over at Game Time. I love to use it, and I'm certainly still going to be scrolling it throughout football season. So with Game Time, download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. This offense didn't do everything right tonight. In fact, they didn't do a lot right. But they got 3 runs, and 3 runs was enough. And to tie it back into our first segment, doesn't matter how they come at this point. You can win 1-0 tomorrow. I don't care. It's a win. You can win 14-13 tomorrow. It's a win. I don't care. You could have a 7-0 lead in the first inning, and then the bottom of the first inning, the Nationals scored 7 off Michael Wacha, but you win it 8-7. I don't care. It's a win. And I think with this offense, everybody is nervous about this group, and I think rightfully so. When you have a 27-inning scoreless drought and nobody's homered since last Monday and guys aren't coming through with runners in scoring position, you have every right to be upset and be angry with this offense, be upset with some of these players, the approaches they've had. They understand that criticism will happen when you just aren't doing enough. But now the Royals have put themselves in a favorable spot once again. And I think we saw during the 7-game losing streak that they were tense. They were nervous. Whether they wanted to admit it or not, they were pressing. And I think any normal fan, any average Joe, any former baseball player could tell you they look like they're pressing. They look tense. They look stressed. Because for the first time all year, when they were losing, the teams that were chasing them were actively winning. And not just winning a series here and there, rattling off 3 in a row. Detroit was going on a tear that nobody had really done all season long. And I think knowing that it was Detroit, it was down and out, and they were in their own division, it brought a little added pressure there. It was different than what Boston was like because the Royals played the Tigers a lot. They only had 6 games against the Red Sox. Or when the Mariners were chasing them, you didn't see them get too worried about it. But I almost think that Detroit turnaround added that extra level of pressure of now nobody's talking about you anymore. And when they are, they're talking about the collapse that you had. People are talking about Detroit and how far they've come and how nobody even blinked at the thought of, or even gave the time of day at the Tigers making a playoff run. Now they're going to be in the postseason. Now we just know they're not mathematically in yet, but I would put some good money down on the fact that Tigers are going to be there. I think the Tigers are going to be playing in October, whether it be in Baltimore or it be against the Astros. I feel pretty strongly at this point that the Tigers will be the second team to punch their ticket out of the American League Central, and hopefully the Royals can be the third. But this offense, I think going into tomorrow, can just breathe a little easier, play a little bit more comfortably. And they're going to need that going into Atlanta because Atlanta is going to be playing for their lives. And I think you can make a case the Royals are playing for their lives. They still need wins in Atlanta to get to October. They can't go in there and get swept. They can't show their bellies and get swept. They can't rely on the Twins to just get throttled by a Baltimore team that may or may not be playing for anything at that point in time. It's a lot of caring about other teams. They need to focus on what they're doing, and they've done that in their first 2 games here in Washington. But tomorrow, I think they can have this peace of mind knowing they took the series, right? And for a lot of people, that was bare minimum the goal. Now it's about going the extra mile. Now it's about doing the thing that maybe a lot of people thought wouldn't be possible after a 7-game losing streak, to go in there and sweep a Nationals team that isn't very good, but you certainly weren't playing well either. So to me, tomorrow can be that game in which they come out, they're loose, you get a couple in the first inning, and then you coast after that. We've seen that on those afternoon getaway games. The Royals pounce on somebody early and be able to coast. I mean, you got Michael Wacha out there who has been easily the most consistent arm for the Royals since like the end of May, if not a little bit before that. He goes out there and gives you 6 innings, 7 innings, 5 innings, 1 or 2 runs. That's what he does every single time out. So when you have the confidence in that pitcher, well, go out there and play a little loose offensively. I do think the one thing that will allow them to breathe a lot easier is someone leaves the yard. Someone homers. I mean, we heard the dugout. We saw and heard the dugout erupt for Kyle Isbell tonight, getting a leadoff walk in an inning that the Royals scored a run, their first run of the game. Now, you can tell that just getting on base at this point, driving in a run is huge for them. They need somebody to wallop one, to smack one 440 feet, whether it be Bobby, Salvi, Renfroe, Melendez, Pham, it doesn't matter, okay? Somebody leaving the yard allows them to just take that deep inhale and exhale and go, we're going to be fine. If they sweep the Nationals tomorrow, I think they go into that series against Atlanta wanting that challenge. That, hey, not only can we punch our ticket, we don't play Atlanta a lot, but we can end their season right here. We can make their Monday doubleheader worthless because Atlanta feels like they need to go in and sweep the Royals, and they're probably going to treat it just like that. Their fans are going to be showing up in bunches. I mean, the Royals will get a little bit of a taste of what a postseason crowd is like this weekend in Atlanta, but if they can take care of business tomorrow, they can fly to Atlanta, have a happy flight, and just breathe a little bit easier. Now, if the Twins lose tomorrow night, they can really breathe easy because even if they go in there and don't do anything and they struggle, the Twins lose 1 game and it's over, right? So if the Twins lose tomorrow to Miami, they have to go and play Baltimore and sweep them. And at the same time, even if they took all 3, the Royals took 1, the Royals are going to Baltimore or to Houston in the first part of October. But again, I think a win tomorrow, and more importantly, the offense breaking out, that's going to allow them to just have a little bit more of a comfortable approach. And I do think desperately they need that going to the Atlanta series. When you're facing Chris Sale, why not us? Facing Max Fried, why not us? Our offense hasn't been any good. Nobody's expecting us to put up a lot of runs. What if we did? And tomorrow, I think getting that confidence of having a couple balls leave the yard, putting up a few in the first inning, it's going to allow everybody just to go up to the plate loose and comfortable and not so wound up and tight, which is what we saw a lot in that 7-game losing streak. But tomorrow, Royals will go for a sweep against the Washington Nationals. Michael Wacha on the bump against Patrick Corbin. First pitch in that game will be 12:05. That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to have a little bit more of a breakdown of what's ahead for the Royals. Dive into what you can expect from Atlanta and how they may handle their pitching matchups. And we'll probably look at what Minnesota may be up to and what led to the American League Central shaking out the way that it did in 2024. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.